Members' business, item number 111, outside the order of precedent, standing in the name of Mr Pearson, relating to the establishment of a select committee on animal cruelty laws.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I move the motion as by leave amended that a select committee be established to inquire into and report on the effectiveness of the arrangements of the administration and enforcement of the laws of New South Wales for the protection of animals from cruelty. And that I note, I wish the House to be aware that I have seriously taken into consideration the concerns that the committee staff are overwhelmed by several committees, and therefore the commencement of this inquiry will not begin until the 3rd week of October 2019 and report by the 2nd of April 2020.
Well, I understand the honourable member's intent. It appears to me that Portfolio Committee 4 or Portfolio Committee 7 is perfectly capable of conducting any such inquiry. And with those few words,
Thank you, Minister. Any further speakers?
I oppose the establishment of the select committee.
Thank you.
Mr Assistant President. Thanks,
Member.
Mr Assistant President, I rise to lead the opposition on this notice of motion regarding the establishment of a select committee to look at aspects of PoCTAA. It's important to recall that during the state election, we actually, on this side, went to the election with a policy about actually having a review of PoCTAA for a range of reasons. And I do understand and highly expect that there's already a body of work being undertaken within government around animal welfare and the like. And indeed, the former minister's in the chamber. He may well have some views on that he may or may not be able to tell us. But the reality is, PoCTAA has not been properly, the whole Act has not actually been properly reviewed for quite some time. I do take the Minister at the Table's comments around the committee structure that we have in this chamber, which is, and I've said on many times, I think an outstanding feature of this place and assists us to do our work looking at matters in detail. Whether or not we need another committee, a select committee, well, that'll be a matter for the House. We will be supporting this. We do think it's timely that there be a review of PoCTAA. My only concern is I don't think this is not the extent of a review that I would have liked, and it doesn't quite meet where we were going with our policy at the election. We actually wanted a full review of PoCTAA, but we'll be supporting this.
Thank you. The Honourable Walt Seckwood.
I rise to support the amended motion by Animal Justice MLC Mark Pearson. I'm part of a group of parliamentarians who are committed to the more humane treatment of animals. I believe that this planet was created not just for our benefit. We are here to share this world, and I believe that all creatures have rights. I do not debate the matter of animal sentience. Every day we witness the capacity of animals to experience different feelings such as suffering and pleasure, negative feelings or emotions including fear, pain, boredom and frustration, and positive feelings like joy. Animals enrich our lives, and our engagement with them help us to become better human beings. They also increase our general well-being and longevity. Sadly, many animals are the only companions that some people have. They teach children empathy and how to care for others. For the record, I've had many spirited debates with my colleagues about puppy farms and the rights of poultry and pigs to have humane treatment. I've also attended voiceless events here in Sydney, and on that note, I deeply wish that I could be vegetarian, but it's not possible for me yet. But I digress. Members would be aware that I have a long-standing association with the Cat Protection Society of New South Wales, a charitable organisation based in Newtown, and I welcome the motion.
Honourable Niall Blair.
Follow that. Thank you, Mr. Assistant President. This committee is a duplicate of what the government is doing to a certain degree. The government has agreed that the PoCTAA legislation needs to be updated. That's why we went out and set up the action plan. We know that community attitudes are changing. We know that legislation is quite outdated. We know that there is a lot that probably could be reviewed, consolidated, and have a look at those agencies that are responsible under PoCTAA for the enforcement of our animal welfare legislation. And the government has also said that we need to review the penalties associated with this. We need to, where necessary, improvement. Now, I know when I said the government is already doing what this committee intends to do, the honourable member said no, and I know that that's not right. What we're not doing is what he wants this committee to do. And we all know that the Honourable Mark Pearson wants this committee to beat up the RSPCA because he's had a long-standing disagreement with the RSPCA on a number of matters when it comes to animal welfare enforcement in this state. And that's why when you read through the motion, it consistently talks about the compliance, charitable compliance agencies, and that is directly targeted at the RSPCA. We know that because he has said constantly when I was the minister that he wanted New South Wales Police to take a larger role. And I know that they're going to look at the government itself maybe being an investigative agency under PoCTAA. At the moment, the government sets the policy and we have at arm's length the organisations that are authorised under PoCTAA to do those investigations and to take those prosecutions through. So this is nothing more than the Honourable Mark Pearson's attempt to get one back at the RSPCA. It's going to take up the time of those people that are looking to overhaul the whole system. We agree that something needs to be done. The government opposes it because the staff should be getting on and doing that change that's needed here in New South Wales.
Ms Abigail Boyd. Ms Boyd.
Thank you very much. I rise on behalf of the Greens to add our support to this motion. I thank the Honourable Mark Pearson for bringing this motion. It's clear that the administration and enforcement of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act is not meeting community expectations. I agree that we do have a lot of committee work to do as members in this chamber, but I appreciate the efforts made to delay the start of this particular inquiry, and I really look forward to sitting on the inquiry and listening to experts and stakeholders tell us their experiences in relation to the administration enforcement of the Act. I appreciate that there is an existing review apparently getting underway by the government, in which case I would view this inquiry as being quite useful for that process, and I would hope that the government and the government members of the inquiry can use the information we gather for the purposes of that review. So I welcome us getting ahead of the game when it comes to what will hopefully be some legislative reform. Thank you.
The Honourable Ben Franklin.
Thank you, Mr Assistant President. Mr Assistant President, the New South Wales Government takes the issue of animal welfare very seriously indeed. We've made it very clear that any act of animal cruelty is directly opposed to the values that the New South Wales community and the New South Wales Government holds. The welfare of animals is in everyone's interest, and the New South Wales Government is ensuring that the right framework is in place to ensure that we support best practice. This includes standing beside our animal welfare enforcement agencies to make sure they're empowered to take action when needed. We've also committed to reforming the animal welfare legislation in this state, a process referred to by the former Minister Niall Blair and which we're trying to get on with instead of undertaking yet another inquiry into the very same thing. As the honourable member is aware, a key component of our legislative reform will be looking at compliance and enforcement. The motion before this House, the motion to establish this committee, is about duplicating the work that this government is already on track to do. Mr Assistant President, there is no denying that people that do the wrong thing should be punished, should face fines under the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act 1979. That's why we encourage members of the public to report suspected animal cruelty to one of the enforcement agencies. And that's because we value the good work that our animal welfare enforcement agencies do. The RSPCA New South Wales and AWL New South Wales inspectors have the power to lawfully investigate acts of animal cruelty and to rightly take action against people who mistreat animals. The Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act provides inspectors with a range of powers to address animal cruelty. This includes seizing an animal if the inspector suspects that on reasonable grounds that the animal is in distress or if an offence against the act or regulation is being or is about to be committed. RSPCA New South Wales and Animal Welfare League New South Wales have been mainstays in the community and play a key role in promoting optimal animal welfare and responsible pet ownership. The New South Wales Government will continue to work with RSPCA New South Wales and Animal Welfare League New South Wales in their important work in enforcing PoCTAA. Mr Assistant President, an MOU has been developed between the New South Wales Government, RSPCA New South Wales, the Animal Welfare League of New South Wales. It came into effect in January 2016 and it addresses how the enforcement agencies maintain appropriate separation of their general advocacy functions and their enforcement functions. As charitable organisations, RSPCA New South Wales and Animal Welfare League are also required to report through the Australian Charities and Not-for-Profits Commission reporting framework. The government will continue to support the role of our animal welfare enforcement agencies, and we oppose the motion.
Thank you. The Honourable Emma Hurst.
I stand in support of my colleague, the Honourable Mark Pearson, moving to establish this long overdue Select Committee on the Administration and Enforcement of New South Wales laws regarding animal cruelty. With horrific stories of animal cruelty and neglect making daily headlines, and the RSPCA reporting an average of 15,000 animal cruelty complaints each and every year, it's clear our laws are failing animals across New South Wales. Our laws are weak and they are not and cannot be enforced. There is no doubt that this inquiry will make the case for change. Because while the main cruelty legislation in New South Wales, known as the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act, can in practice be enforced by 3 authorities: the New South Wales Police, RSPCA New South Wales and the Animal Welfare League, in reality, the majority of this enforcement, investigation and prosecution is done by RSPCA New South Wales, a charitable organisation relying almost entirely on the public for the majority of its income. Let me repeat that. Our criminal legislation that protects animals here in New South Wales is enforced by a private, publicly funded charity with extremely little funding from the government. How much? I am not a regular donor of the RSPCA, and I wonder how many people in this House are. But if your neighbour is beating a dog, do you expect the RSPCA to come and investigate, to house that dog, to give that dog veterinary treatment and to prosecute the person for beating that dog? And if so, with what money and with what support? And is this seriously the right framework for protecting animals here in New South Wales? Here in Parliament, we have the power to make change and take action on behalf of all animal lovers across New South Wales and to protect animals. So I urge to take the first step forward and support this urgent inquiry. Only then can we find out how badly our system is broken, and I wonder if that's what the government is really afraid of. Because at the moment the system is broken, it's failing animals, and what we need to find out what we need to do to fix it.
Thank you. Any further speakers? Mr. David Shoebridge.
Exactly.
Mr Deputy President, I rise to support the motion brought before the House to establish this, as have other speakers have said, long overdue review of the laws in this state, the inadequate laws in this state that are meant to prevent cruelty to animals. And in doing that, I commend and endorse the words of my colleague, Ms Abigail Boyd, who leads for us on questions of protecting animals. But I also endorse and support the words of both the Honourable Mark Pearson and the Honourable Emma Hurst in their support and they're explaining why this inquiry is essential. I hear the cries from the government that there is some funding that goes from the government to the RSPCA, a fraction of the RSPCA's costs. And the RSPCA themselves say on their website that only a tiny percentage, some 2% of their funding, actually comes from government. And so when this inquiry is asking whether it is effective and appropriate for non-government charitable organisations to be granted investigative and enforcement powers for criminal prosecutions under the Act, surely that's a fair thing for the committee to look at. What other part of our criminal law that deals with cruelty and violence do we contract out to a charity to enforce? The reason the government is satisfied with the existing laws and doesn't want this inquiry is because they're quite happy for animals to be protected not by a properly funded separate government investigative unit, not by a properly funded specialist part of the New South Wales Police, but by a charity. By a charity. The government is clearly out of touch with the balance of the community here. When you speak to members of the community and you tell them that our prevention of cruelty to animal laws are principally enforced by a charity, not by the police, they cannot believe it because the community values animals and responds far more strongly and far more emotionally, as they should,
to the cruelty they see being inflicted on animals and the indifference of this government to protecting the interests of animals. And so when this committee also asks whether the government should establish a specialist unit to investigate animal cruelty complaints and enforce animal protection laws, either as part of the New South Wales Police Force or as a separate statutory enforcement agency, of course we should be asking those questions. We should inform the community about how weak our animal protection laws are. The community knows that animals aren't being protected. They want somebody resourced and independent on the beat. They would be appalled. The more people who know that our animal welfare laws are enforced by an underfunded charity, the more they're appalled at the lack of movement by this government and the more they will endorse this important inquiry.
Any further speakers? The Honourable Mark Pearson.
Thank you, Assistant President. I'll be brief. Arm's length, the Honourable Noel Blair said. The government is keeping the protection of animals through a criminal legislation at arm's length from the government. Would we want children to be protected by a body which is arm's length from the government? Mentally ill people, all vulnerable people, women who are subject to domestic violence. Should the enforcement agencies be at arm's length from the government? No. We should be watching this very closely and having a department which is able to administer, investigate and prosecute, where necessary, criminal legislation. This is not about wanting to bash up the RSPCA, Animal Welfare League or anything else. This is an inquiry as to the effectiveness and efficacy of the actual administration of the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act. Nothing more. So I welcome every member's contribution, including the cats, Gary and Brutus, and I commend this Select Committee inquiry to the House.
Thank you, members. There's a motion before us put by... the question is that of the member, the Honourable Mark Pearson. I'll put it. Those in favour say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Against?
No.
The noes have it. The ayes have it.
Yes, we do.
I tried.
Lock the doors. The question is that the motion of Mr Pearson be agreed to. The ayes will pass to the right of the chair, the noes to the left of the chair. I appoint the opposition whip and deputy whip as tellers for the ayes, the government whip and deputy whip as tellers for the noes. There being 23 ayes and 18 noes, the question is resolved in the positive. Unlock the doors.